Welcome to Things You Don't Know. This time we're looking at how Donald Trump has pressured the press and putting pressure on freedom of the press. Very important issue, I think.
I would have to agree with you, Dr. Weaver.
Yeah, Donald Trump has never hidden his contempt for much of the American press. He has called reporting fake news. He has repeatedly attacked individual journalists. He has described the press as an enemy, and presidents absolutely have the right to complain about coverage they believe is unfair. That's true. But during Trump's second administration, the issue has become far more complicated. The question is no longer simply, is the president insulting the media? The question is, what happens when criticism is accompanied by government power?
Because there is an enormous difference between saying Jimmy Kimmel is terrible, don't watch him, and having the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission suggest that broadcasters carrying Kimmel may face government consequences. There's a difference between criticizing CBS and having a multi-billion-dollar corporate merger awaiting FCC approval, while CBS's parent company is negotiating a lawsuit with the president. And there's also a difference between arguing with a news organization and restricting its access because you dislike the terminology that it uses. And that's what we're examining today, not whether Donald Trump is allowed to fight with the media. Yes, he is. That's not the issue here. The issue is whether government authority is being used or threatened to make criticism more costly.
Let's establish something at the beginning. The First Amendment does not protect Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, CNN, Fox News, which doesn't need protection from him, obviously, or anyone else from criticism. People can boycott them. Sure, advertisers can leave, viewers can change channels, a television network can cancel a program for financial reasons, and Donald Trump can say a program is terrible.
Yes, he can. The constitutional concern begins when government says, in effect, change what you are saying, or your license, access, government approval, funding, or regulatory treatment may suffer. That's why the Jimmy Kimmel controversy became so important. In September 2025, after conservative activist Charlie Kirk was assassinated, Jimmy Kimmel made remarks about the political reaction to the killing. His comments were heavily criticized, including by conservatives who believed Kimmel had mischaracterized the suspected killer's politics. People had every right to criticize him, but then FCC Chairman Brendan Carr entered the dispute. Carr wasn't simply another television viewer. He headed the federal agency that regulates America's broadcast television stations.
Speaking on a conservative broadcast, Carr said Disney, the owner of ABC, had a serious problem. Then came the sentence that transformed the controversy. Carr said, "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." Sounds like something somebody from the mafia would say. He
Sure
suggested,
does.
yeah, he suggested local stations could take action against Kimmel and discussed potential FCC consequences if broadcasters repeatedly aired material the agency considered distorted. ABC quickly suspended Jimmy Kimmel Live. Nexstar announced that its ABC affiliates would stop carrying the program. Sinclair later withheld it as well and called for an apology and a donation to Charlie Kirk's organization. Now, Kimmel returned less than a week later. The affiliates eventually restored his program. Both Sinclair and Nexstar said their decisions were independent and not caused by government pressure. Ha ha ha. Yeah, what a coincidence, huh?
Yeah, you're right. What a coincidence, Dr. Weaver. And that distinction matters. We cannot prove that Carr ordered ABC to suspend Kimmel. ABC is a private company. But when the person controlling the federal regulatory agency essentially says there's an easy way and a hard way, then broadcasters know that the FCC controls licenses they need in order to operate. And that is why the incident produced criticism not only from liberals, but from some conservatives as well. Conservatives who were worried that government regulatory authority was being mixed with political retaliation.
Yeah, and then it happened again. The Kimmel dispute did not end in 2025. No, no. In April 2026, Kimmel made another joke involving Melania Trump. Oh my. Donald and Melania Trump publicly demanded that ABC fire him. ABC did not. Then on April 28th, the FCC ordered Disney to submit all 8 of its ABC owned television station licenses for unusually early renewal proceedings. Those licenses ordinarily would not begin coming up for renewal until 2028. Just a little early here. The FCC said the action was connected to an investigation into possible unlawful discrimination and Disney employment practices, not Kimmel's jokes. I just can't believe that. I'm sorry.
Well, I can't believe that either, Dr. Weaver. So we have to be precise here. There is no established evidence here that Trump secretly ordered the FCC to review ABC's licenses because of Jimmy Kimmel. The FCC gave another reason, but the sequence naturally generated suspicion. The president and first lady demanded Kimmel's firing. Kimmel remained on television, and almost immediately afterward, ABC was ordered into an extraordinarily early licensing process. That does not prove retaliation, but it certainly does illustrate why independent regulatory agencies are supposed to stay separate from a president's personal disputes.
Okay, let's turn to Stephen Colbert. And what do we actually know?
Well, Stephen Colbert's case requires even more caution, Dr. Weaver. Colbert was one of Trump's most persistent television critics. In 2025, Paramount, the parent company of CBS, agreed to pay $16 million to settle Trump's lawsuit over a 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris. CBS had previously argued Trump's claims were without merit. Colbert went on television and described the settlement as what he called a big fat bribe. Days later, CBS announced that The Late Show with Stephen Colbert would end in May 2026.
That timing understandably caused accusations of political retaliation, but CBS explicitly denied it, of course. The network said the cancellation was purely a financial decision caused by the difficult economics of late night television and was unrelated to Colbert's ratings, content, or the Paramount the situation. And declining economics in traditional late night television are real, yeah. So we should not tell our audience that Trump had Colbert fired. There's no direct evidence proving that, but it sure is suspicious as hell.
Yes, it's suspicious as hell. And what made people suspicious was the larger situation here. Paramount was attempting to complete an $8.4 billion merger with Skydance, and that merger required FCC approval. Paramount settled Trump's lawsuit. Colbert publicly ridiculed the settlement. Colbert's show was canceled, and shortly after that, the Trump-controlled FCC approved the Paramount Skydance transaction. Again, that sequence does not prove a secret deal, but it does explain the concern.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I share that concern. I think it's a big fat bribe.
I do too, and I don't believe in coincidences either, Dr. Weaver.
Yeah. And Trump celebrated Colbert's cancellation. He then said, Jimmy Kimmel should be next. That is political speech that Trump is entitled to make, of course. But when the president is saying it controls an executive branch whose regulators hold tremendous power over the companies employing those entertainers, the words have considerably more weight than those of an ordinary television critic. To turn to the 60-minute settlement. The Paramount controversy deserves another look because this involved actual journalism rather than comedy. Trump sued CBS over the editing of a 60-minute interview with Kamala Harris. He claims CBS deceptively edited Harris's answers to help her politically. CBS denied that. Trump eventually sought $20 billion. Paramount settled for $16 million. Company executives said settling avoided potentially enormous legal expenses and the uncertainty of litigation. That's a legitimate business consideration, I suppose.
But inside CBS News, the settlement caused serious distress. Reuters reported that journalists worried that it would establish a precedent in which powerful politicians could use massive lawsuits against news organizations while their corporate owners had unrelated business before government regulators. There was also increased executive scrutiny of Trump related 60 Minutes reporting. Although Reuters reported that no stories were ultimately prevented from airing, longtime 60 Minutes executive producer Bill Owens resigned after questioning whether he would retain sufficient editorial independence. CBS News President Wendy McMahon also left after saying she and the company no longer agreed on the path forward.
And this is where the chilling effect becomes important. Government censorship does not always require somebody standing in a newsroom saying, you may not broadcast this. Pressure can also work when corporate executives start asking, will this report create problems with the White House? Will it affect our merger? Will it trigger another lawsuit? Will the FCC come after our stations? A newsroom can technically remain free while people above the newsroom become increasingly nervous about exercising that freedom.
And there is an even clearer example involving the Associated Press. After Trump ordered the federal government to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, the AP decided that its journalism would continue using Gulf of Mexico while acknowledging Trump's new official terminology. The White House responded by restricting AP journalists from smaller presidential events, including some Oval Office appearances and Air Force One travel.
Think about what caused the punishment. Not a security violation, not disruptive behavior, not fabricated reporting. A news organization refused to adopt the government's preferred wording. A federal district court later ruled that the administration had improperly retaliated against the Associated Press because of the content of its speech. An appeals court subsequently stayed enforcement of that ruling while the case continued allowing the White House's access policy to remain in place for the time being only.
And that case gets very close to the heart of the First Amendment. The government does not have to like what journalists write, but government officials generally cannot punish a news organization merely because it refuses to use the government's preferred language.
The FCC controversy extends far beyond Kimmel. In March 2026, while Trump was furious about reporting concerning the Iran war, FCC Chairman Brendan Carr publicly warned broadcasters about their licenses. Carr said broadcasters running what he called hoaxes and news distortions had an opportunity to correct course before their licenses came up for renewal. Sounds like a threat to me.
Me too.
He added that broadcasters could lose their licenses if they failed to operate in the public interest. Another threat.
Broadcasters really do have public interest obligations. The FCC really does regulate local television and radio licenses, but that authority traditionally has very strict constitutional limits. The federal government cannot simply declare reporting politically unfavorable to the president to be just fake news and then revoke the station's license because of it. That would put government's officials in the position of deciding which journalism Americans are allowed to hear and what they're not allowed to hear.
During the same period, Trump escalated his own rhetoric. He accused unspecified news organizations of spreading information favorable to Iran and suggested that members of the media should face treason charges. Another real blatant threat. Treason is among the gravest crimes in American law. You can be shot, firing squad. Reuters described those remarks as an escalation in Trump's long-standing attacks on the press.
The Pentagon has also dramatically tightened reporters' access. In 2025, new rules require journalists to acknowledge restrictions that news organizations believed could threaten their credentials for seeking certain classified and even some unclassified information. More than 30 major news organizations rejected this policy. That group wasn't ideologically uniform. It included Reuters, the Associated Press, CNN, Fox News, CBS, NBC, ABC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, NPR, Newsmax, and others. Many surrendered their Pentagon credentials rather than accept these new rules.
The Pentagon defended the restrictions as necessary for national security. Now, national security is a legitimate government responsibility. Reporters do not have a constitutional right to wander through classified areas, but journalists argued that the rules went considerably further, potentially punishing ordinary efforts to obtain information from sources. Federal judges have ruled against portions of the Pentagon's restrictions, although litigation and appeals have continued. By 2026, even the Pentagon press office itself had been redesignated, if you can imagine this, as a classified space. Further limiting reporter access sounds like an authoritarian government reform. Then there is public broadcasting. Trump repeatedly accused NPR and PBS of political bias and pushed to eliminate federal support. Congress ultimately approved Trump's request to rescind roughly $1.1 billion intended for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Trump gleefully signed it. The loss of funding eventually caused the Corporation for Public Broadcasting to shut down, disrupting support for hundreds of local stations.
And this issue is constitutionally different from banning a newspaper. Congress is not obligated to subsidize NPR or PBS. Conservatives have opposed taxpayer support for public broadcasting for decades and argued that taxpayers should not be forced to finance outlets that are considered politically biased.
That, yeah, you're right. That's legitimate, isn't it, in some ways, Chen?
Yeah, I would say that's a legitimate policy argument, Dr. Weaver.
Yeah, but Trump's justification matters. His administration explicitly attacked NPR and PBS for their editorial viewpoint while seeking to terminate their support. A threat. A federal judge later permanently blocked Trump's separate executive order targeting NPR and PBS funding on First Amendment grounds. Congress's legislative funding cuts, however, had already done substantial damage to the public broadcasting system.
Now, Trump has also repeatedly sued media organizations. And again, we need balance here. Presidents do not surrender their right to sue for defamation. Journalists can make mistakes. For example, ABC's George Stephanopoulos inaccurately described the legal finding against Trump in the Jean Carroll litigation. ABC settled Trump's lawsuit for $15 million toward his presidential library plus legal fees.
But other Trump lawsuits have involved enormous claims against reporting he simply said was false or unfair. He sued the Wall Street Journal for at least $10 billion over its Jeffrey Epstein reporting. He filed a $15 billion lawsuit against the New York Times and Penguin Random House. A federal judge threw out the original Times complaint and criticized its format as an improper vehicle for attacking political adversaries, although Trump was allowed an opportunity to amend it.
Yes, a lawsuit is not censorship by itself, but repeated multi-billion-dollar lawsuits can become part of the pressure environment because even winning a case costs a news organization money, attorney time, and executive attention. And that is why press freedom organizations focus not merely on whether Trump ultimately wins these cases, but on whether litigation is being used to make aggressive reporting increasingly expensive.
Then there is Trump's treatment of individual reporters. Presidents have fought with reporters since the beginning of the Republic. Trump, however, regularly turns those disagreements into personal attacks. And some of his attacks on female reporters have been particularly degrading. In November 2025, Bloomberg reporter Catherine Lucy questioned Trump aboard Air Force One about Jeffrey Epstein. Trump pointed toward her and said, "Quiet, piggy." The White House later defended the remark, saying Trump's frankness was part of what voters appreciated about him.
And this wasn't just an isolated incident in history. During the 2015 Republican primary, Fox News host Megyn Kelly asked Trump about derogatory things he had said about women. Trump subsequently said that she had blood coming out of her eyes and blood coming out of her wherever. The remark was widely interpreted as a reference to menstruation. Trump later denied that interpretation.
I don't know how he thought he could deny that. It's pretty clear. Blood coming out of her wherever. Come on, get real.
Yeah.
More recently, he criticized CNN's Caitlin Collins while she was questioning him and remarked that he could not remember seeing her smile. That kind of comment attracts charges of sexism because women in professional settings have long been told to smile or criticized for their appearance and demeanor rather than the substance of their work.
Now, Dr. Weaver, it is also important to acknowledge here that he does insult male workers and male reporters as well. His hostility toward the press is not exclusively directed towards women. The sexism criticism comes from the form some of the attacks on women take. Comments about appearance, femininity, menstruation, weight, or smiling. Now, calling a reporter's story wrong, that's one thing, but calling a woman piggy because she asked an unwanted question or a question that he doesn't want to tell the truth about, that's a whole different thing, Dr. Weaver.
Yes, it certainly is, Chandler.
Now, Trump's defenders have an argument that shouldn't simply be dismissed here. The American press is not perfect. Journalists make mistakes. Some commentators openly despise Trump. Political satire can be vicious. And television networks are large corporations with their own financial interests. And many conservatives believe that major news organizations treated Trump far more aggressively than Democratic presidents.
Those criticisms can be debated, and people who believe the media is biased should criticize it. It's a right. They should cancel subscriptions. They should organize boycotts. They should create competing media. They should complain to networks. That is also free speech.
Yes, it is, but freedom of speech cannot mean my speech is protected, but the government should punish yours. A conservative commentator's First Amendment rights and Jimmy Kimmel's First Amendment rights, well, they come from the same Constitution. Fox News and MSNBC, they're protected by the same amendment, too. So are NPR, Newsmax, CBS, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal.
The important question isn't whether you like the person being targeted. Maybe you think that Stephen Colbert was obnoxious. Maybe you think Jimmy Kimmel crossed a line. Maybe you believe CNN is biased. Maybe you distrust NPR. None of that resolves the constitutional question. The test is what should happen when someone you dislike criticizes the person holding government power.
And that is precisely when constitutional protection matters most. If the First Amendment protects only agreeable speech, it protects almost nothing. The danger isn't that Donald Trump complains about journalists. American presidents have always complained about journalists. That's nothing new. But the danger comes when the message becomes criticize me and perhaps your government access changes. Criticize me and perhaps regulators take another look at your licenses. Criticize me and perhaps a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit arrives. Criticize me and perhaps government officials begin talking about treason, and you know what that punishment is.
Donald Trump says he is defending free speech against a biased media establishment. His supporters believe he is finally holding powerful news organizations accountable. But accountability and retaliation are not the same thing.
And a free press does not mean a press free from criticism. It means that government cannot demand favorable treatment as the price of regulatory peace, access, funding, or the freedom to publish. You don't have to like Jimmy Kimmel. You don't have to watch Stephen Colbert. You don't have to trust CNN, NPR, CBS, or any other news organization for that matter.
That's right. But once government power is used to make criticism dangerous, expensive, or professionally risky, the issue becomes much larger than Donald Trump. It becomes a question about how much disagreement an American president is willing to tolerate and how much disagreement the Constitution requires him to tolerate.
And on that question, the First Amendment was written to take the side of disagreement.
Yes, indeed. Listen, I want to thank you for tuning in and listening. If you have comments, please make them. If you would, we would love to have your likes and your subscription.
Yeah, we would love to have your subscriptions, and we would also like to have your opinion about some of these clearly false claims.
Yes. All right. Bye for now. We'll
Bye
catch you
bye.
again.